I did my best, but sadly, my best wasn't good enough. Are they gonna ghost me? More waiting. I don't want this job anymore. Hi, today I'm going to share the amazing story of how God gave me my first job. As I mentioned in a previous video, my unemployment struggles, you can check it here and I'll link it down below. I had to go through a long process of waiting and preparation before I finally got employed for my first official job. So stick around and hopefully you'll find inspiration and encouragement from my story of waiting on God, especially if you're waiting for a job yourself or for something else. So stick around. So I graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering last May 2020, but since the country was in lockdown for a long time, I didn't look for jobs right away. In fact, it took me a year before I started the job hunt. I started looking for jobs last August 2021. I made my resume, my LinkedIn account, and all that. My very first interview was actually for a management trainee position in a logistics company. The interview was okay, and it was actually the CEO of the company himself who interviewed me right away. It was pretty unique. That was one heck of a first interview. But since it was the first and only company that I've applied for during that time, the CEO advised me to explore other options first, because I guess he didn't want to have to train me only for me to leave the company eventually because I didn't know what was out there. And honestly, I wasn't ready. It was too early and I did want to explore other options too. So I reached out to the CEO and told him that I do agree with his advice and that I would not continue on with my application because it would be unfair for the both of us if I went with the job just because it was the job available then. Of course, I wanted to work for a job that I actually like and not just the job that's readily available. Just like in relationships, you don't pursue a person just because you want a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You pursue a person because you actually like them and you actually want to be with them. But I actually don't consider this as my first interview. I honestly didn't prepare for this interview at all. So I just consider it as a teaser, like an opening act that I'm very grateful to have experienced. What I considered to be my first interview was for a management trainee position in one of the leading FMCG companies in the whole world. And you can expect that it was a highly competitive application. It was the first job interview that I had prepared for, and I prepared for one whole week. I did my research, I practiced interview questions, but as early as the first interview, I failed. I did not make it past the first interview, which lasted for 1.5 hours, and it was probably the most challenging interview I've ever had in my life, because I really had to dig deep into my past accomplishments, particularly my leadership achievements, which wasn't a lot to begin with. It wasn't stellar. I wasn't stellar at school either, and I bet there are many other applicants who have more achievements than I have. So even in the get-go, I don't think that I'm the type of person that they're looking for, but I still gave the interview a shot. I did my best, but sadly, my best wasn't good enough.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not.
But if anything, this interview taught me that if I can survive this interview, I can survive all of the interviews that I'll have in the future. I soon accepted that it's not for me, even though I worked hard on it and prayed a lot for it. Looking back, I actually have this memorable experience with this first interview. I was fervently praying to God about this job, and I'm not sure, but yeah, it was probably God who whispered to me, "It's yours if you want it." And so I thought, yes, I really want it. So I had hope that God was going to give me this job. But when I didn't get the job, I wondered, did God really say that to me? Was it really God? But if I really wanted it, then how come I didn't get the job? If it were really God who spoke to me, then it means I don't really want the job. And true enough, later on, I was able to admit to myself that I wanted this job for the wrong reasons. I didn't want the job itself, but the title, the salary, and the prestige that comes with working in that company. But I didn't want the particular challenges and responsibilities that came along with it. In fact, right after the job interview, which was super draining, I told myself, I don't want this job anymore. And so I think that God just revealed the condition, the true condition of my heart that time. I didn't really want the job as I thought I did, and this led me to reflect about my priorities in life, what I really want, what my dreams and ambitions actually are. My second interview was for yet another management trainee position, but this time in a clothing company, one of the popular ones. I took a shot at the job because I had experience running a small clothing business online, and so I thought that I would be great at this job. And I was quite confident about the skills and experiences that I had for this job, even though my degree was quite far away from the typical degrees that they would usually look for. But despite my confidence, I failed again. I didn't make it past the second interview, probably because there were more applicants who had degrees more suitable to this clothing marketing company. And to be honest, I don't even shop there, probably just one time. And actually, it was a purely on-site job in the metro, and I wasn't sure if I was willing to take the risk of exposure. This interview, I was confident that I was gonna get the job, but I didn't. My skills and my experiences didn't matter because the job wasn't for me. You can plan and prepare, but it's ultimately God's will that prevails. So I have to rely on God, not on my own understanding, and the basis of my confidence should not be myself, but God. After that, I took a break from job hunting and instead focused on building up my YouTube channel and somehow on the side exploring other possible options like freelancing, although I really wanted to work a regular corporate job first. I also took a break from the job hunt because of the many uncertainties. Of course, you have the COVID-19 situation, and I also didn't know which job I was willing to take and if that job was even worth risking my life for, technically. I wanted a job with pros that would outweigh the cons, such as in finances. To tell you the truth, I didn't want to settle for a low salary job, so I was quite picky with my applications. I would actually research the salary ranges in a particular company. That was just my conviction. I didn't want to settle for less because I know that God can give me a job with a decent basic salary, even for a fresh graduate. I've submitted my resume to lots of companies. Most of them didn't even acknowledge my application. Some of them wrote back to reject my application, which was better than completely ignoring it. Some I didn't push through with the interviews. There were actually around 6 or 7 companies that asked me for an interview, but I didn't push through with them anymore. And you might ask, but why? Well, it's because I was eyeing these 3 major applications that I'm mentioning in this video. And I didn't really have a strong leading towards those other positions in those companies. I didn't really expect that they would consider me anyway, because most of them don't reply to you at all. So I was just trying, and my heart just wasn't really there. I think it's God's subtle leading. But come November 2021, when I wasn't looking for it, when I was busy doing something else, God gave me a job opportunity. And I really emphasize that God gave it to me even more because it came unexpectedly, and it came at a time when I was already ready to receive what I've been praying for. Just like love, it comes when you least expect it, when you're not looking for it. That's what they say, I don't know. But for sure, it comes when you're ready. This job opportunity landed on my lap through a friend, so God used her as a vessel, as an instrument to answer one of my longtime prayers. One day I saw her Instagram story, and so we had a nice conversation, and she randomly gave me the email address of the HR of this company. At first, I didn't think much of it because I was on a job hunt hiatus, but the following day I sent my resume asking if there were any job vacancies that I could apply for, and I didn't hear from the HR for a week, so I just assumed that they didn't get my email, or there were no job vacancies, or they just weren't interested in my profile. But I got a call one night. It was around 5 to 6 p.m. and it was an unknown number, and I don't usually answer unknown calls unless they text me first. But there was this voice again. It was probably God again, and he said, "Answer the call." And a few seconds later, the HR introduced herself to me via text and called again. So she told me about the job vacancy that suits my profile, and that she did receive my email but didn't reply to me right away because there were no available jobs the time I emailed her. And so I sent some forms right away. The next day I already had a formal interview with the HR, and the day after that an interview with a panel of managers. But I was actually stressed about it because that particular day and time, there was a power outage in our community. My interview was around 5 to 5:30 p.m. and it was already dark, and so I was using my phone for an interview and a flashlight as my light. and the neighbor's dog was barking outside. It was so embarrassing. I still did my best despite the disturbances, and it was actually a refreshing interview. It was just like talking to a bunch of mentors. But then the struggle started when I had to play the waiting game. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks, and in those 2 long weeks I was very impatient. I kept asking God for reassurances. One day when I prayed to God for reassurance, I saw my Bible and the word Habakkuk came to my mind immediately. I've never read Habakkuk before, but I know that it was in the New Testament, so I opened my Bible. So I read the whole book of Habakkuk, but the verses that struck me were chapter 2 verse 3 and chapter 3 verses 17 to 18. If you read those verses in the Bible, you will have an idea of what God told my heart, what God spoke to my heart through these verses, and it was more than reassuring. But even then, stubborn and impatient as I am, I was still anxious. So I waited those 2 weeks before I followed up with my application, and eventually I got scheduled for an interview with a bigger boss. But then, another week of waiting, it was even harder to schedule an interview with the biggest boss of the department. Eventually that day came and I had to sell myself for 10 minutes. I was nervous at that time. I remember I had a lump in my throat. I was struggling to speak because my heart was racing very fast. But by the grace of God, I completed the presentation well. But after that is really where the suffering intensifies. More waiting. The feeling that I was so close, yet so far away. I didn't hear from them again for another week or so, plus it was the holiday season, so people were pretty busy. And by this time I had been waiting for around 6 weeks already, and I didn't apply to any other jobs anymore. I didn't take other interviews anymore because I really believed that this was the job that God had for me, because God opened this door. God opened the door, but He wasn't letting me in. Not yet, not just yet. And it was a painful waiting period, but I learned so much in that time. Stuff I would not have learned to the extent and meaning that I did if I didn't have to wait. For the whole duration of 6 weeks, I had been doubting and worrying, especially in weeks 5 to 6 when I already started to question God.
Lord, I thought this job was mine. What's taking so long? Is it still gonna push through? Did you really give this job to me? Why am I not hearing from them? I thought they liked me. Why do I have to keep following up? Does that mean I'm forcing myself into this job, or is it just to test my perseverance? Are they gonna ghost me? Is God just playing with my feelings? Is God just getting my hopes up?
All that doubting and worrying. I was just so scared to get disappointed for something I had hoped so strongly for. And it damaged my faith to an extent that I even got angry with God. I even decided to give up hoping for this job and to probably move on to other opportunities. But in my anger with God, He was just with me. He was patient with me and He never left. And I talk more about this in my 3rd vlog. And just a few days later, I got my hopes up again. I just couldn't get myself to give up on this, not until God has had a final say on the matter, not until they blatantly tell me that they're not pushing through with my application. I will trust the conviction that God has placed in my heart. And 2 days before Christmas, upon waking up, I asked God whether or not I should follow up on my application, and He said no. And I was like, okay. So I slept again, and when I woke up again, I asked Him a second time and He said no. And then I asked a 3rd time and He said no need. Okay then, at your word, Lord. Probably not a good time to follow up anyway. And later on, I proceeded with a short personal worship session, and I was just very happy, very much at peace, just enjoying God's presence. And I even told God, Lord, I am ready. Whether or not you give me this job, it's okay. I love you more anyway. Whether or not you grant me my heart's desire, I'm yours. Because after all, you are my heart's greatest desire. I've learned so much about myself, my faith, and my relationship with God, and I was content. It was enough, and I was just ready. I was in full surrender. But then in the middle of a song, I got interrupted by a call, and I was like,
who dares to interrupt this?
But I saw it was the HR, so I answered it right away, and she broke the news that I was already hired. That's why God told me no need, because the job offer was already here. It came only when I was fully ready. But the waiting doesn't end there. I still had to wait to complete certain requirements, including a comprehensive medical examination and a lot of paperwork. And I had concerns about the working arrangement since I was supposed to relocate to the metro as soon as possible. But since there's another COVID surge, our company allowed me to temporarily work from home in the province, so yay! I still worried a few instances though. I'm sorry. Old habits die hard, but I'm working on it. For instance, I had a medical requirement that I needed at the soonest possible time, but the earliest appointment I could get was still in a week. So I just told God, Lord, you know what I need, you know the urgency, I don't know what to do, but I don't want to make rash decisions. I don't want to worry anymore, so please just take care of this, and I'm just gonna take a nap. And I really took a nap, and when I woke up, God already made a way. God already solved my problem. So you can see at this point, my trust was already beginning to solidify. I was learning how to trust in God, and the rest is history. The most important lesson that I've learned from this whole journey, this whole story, is that God is enough. A lot of times we have to go through a refining process, and if we don't go through these necessary steps, we won't be equipped for the next steps. We might end up questioning God, but remember, God is worthy of our full trust, even trust beyond the borders of what we can see, and that's faith. If we place our faith in God, we'll realize that He's enough, and that Him being in the process with us is what will actually satisfy our hearts more than the fulfillment of any of our heart's desires. And if a desire you have is really God's will for your life, it will come to fruition, and what may seem like a delay in our eyes is part of God's design. Another lesson that I've learned. That's the same dog who was barking on my interview. Another lesson is, don't let yourself be unfruitful in the waiting. There were days when I just sulked and achieved nothing. Absolutely nothing. And God would remind me of the parable of the sower in chapter 13 of Matthew, particularly the seed falling among the thorns, someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life make him unfruitful. I could be doing a lot more things instead of worrying. I could be working on my YouTube channel, I could be reading my Bible, I could focus on other things that would make me grow in the Lord even more. I worried too much that it was already becoming sinful. It was already becoming an act of unbelief in my part. I was so scared to get disappointed, but I seemed to have forgotten about the object of my faith in His character. But I thank God that He's a very patient Father. Nonetheless, we owe it to Him to place our full trust in Him, that whether or not we receive what we're praying for in the way and timing that we prefer, God will lead us to where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there, and for the right reasons. And truly, any door that God opens, no one can close. And I think this is the biblical basis of the saying that what is really meant for you will find you. But in everything we do, everything we work for, everything we pray for, we do it for the glory of God. And so we follow His will, His way, and His timing, because ultimately we want to glorify God with our life. So in those 2 months in between my first interview for the job that God gave me and my first day at work, I have learned so many things, and I have communicated with God so closely, so intently, that He would even speak to me, leading me to certain Bible passages, or even directly speaking to my heart or to my mind every time I sincerely ask Him to. That is how absolutely amazing God is, and I'm so blessed and grateful to have experienced Him, communicated with Him, and walked with Him through this whole process. I am so glad that I waited on God. His ways and His timing are so strategically formulated for His maximum glory, and if we ask Him and wait on Him, we can witness that. We can witness that masterpiece of a plan unfold before our very eyes. So if you're waiting on God, keep it up. If you could worry less and pray more, please do so. I hope that this long story inspired you and showed you that there is a purpose for every painful process, and if you let God lead you through the process, He will not let your tears be cried in vain. And there is no one more worthy to receive our faith, our full trust, but God. When you place your faith in God, it will always be worth it. Thank you for staying with me till the very end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if you've been inspired by this video. And please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Click the bell notification button to stay updated. And I would appreciate it if you checked out my other videos as well. And that's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye!